If you've watched competitive Melee for any length of time, you've probably seen Hungrybox do some pretty insane things after winning a set. The man has broken chairs, broken bones, and broken the laws of thermodynamics. I literally proved that one in an old video. But at Genesis X2, something completely different happened. Hungrybox didn't pop off. He didn't throw a chair, he didn't break his foot, he didn't pass out. He just cried before the game was even over. Some people in the audience thought it was theatrics, but it wasn't. It was the culmination of 3 years of people writing him off, and when the moment finally came, he couldn't hold it together long enough to even finish the game. This was genuinely one of the most emotional moments in Melee history, and it had me emotional myself. But then I had a thought that I really wish I didn't have. How much did he actually cry? Like, volumetrically. Because, let's be honest, Hungrybox has had a long career, one chock full of waterworks. If he had been producing emotional tears at this rate across that entire career, how much total fluid has this man generated? Thank you to Helix Sleep, who is paid to be mentioned in today's video. Helix offers over 20 unique mattresses at various price points and firmness, so they have a sleep solution for just about anyone. My current rectangle to Sleepy Town is the Helix Midnight Luxe with their Glaciotex cooling cover. It's the model that won Best Overall Mattress on both Forbes and Wired. USA Today named them one of the most trusted brands of 2026, and it's also the mattress I got matched with via Helix's convenient sleep quiz, which only takes a few minutes to fill out. If I'm being honest, I was a bit skeptical about the whole mattress in a box thing, but I truthfully really enjoy this bed a lot. I think my sleep has gotten noticeably better and it feels way more comfortable than my last sleep chariot. I always used to sleep hot and I literally noticed the Glaciotex cooling cover, which is pretty awesome. Hell, even my sleep tracker told me that I am by the numbers catching better Z's. Speaking of numbers, a whopping 82% of Helix Sleep users saw an increase in their deep sleep cycle, according to Helix's Wesper sleep study. Plus, Nala loves the bed too, and I can't say no to her. And I get that mattresses can be a hefty investment, but if you're interested, Helix is running a spring savings event for 20% off site-wide to help cut down on some of that cost. Shipping is free, and all of their mattresses come with a lifetime warranty plus a 120-night sleep trial to ensure that you love it. You can go to my link at helixsleep.com/turndownforWalt or scan the QR code on screen to check it out for yourself. Thanks again to Helix Sleep for supporting the channel, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Okay, so before I get into the science, I should probably give a little bit of background on what actually happened here. It's Valentine's Day weekend in 2025, and we're at Genesis X2 in San Jose, California, one of the most prestigious tournaments in Melee. And by the way, Genesis X2 is actually technically Genesis 11. Genesis 10 was Genesis X, and then they thought adding a different number instead of Roman numerals to the end would be cute and fun and rad or whatever, and now it's just like confusing, but I don't know, whatever. Hungrybox, the Jigglypuff player, is up against Triff, the Peach player, in Grand Finals. And aside from the big history that is the Genesis Tournament series, this wasn't any old Grand Finals. A lot was on the line for both competitors. You see, this was Triff's first time ever making it to Grand Finals at a major level event, which in and of itself is an insane achievement. If he won here, he'd not only reignite Peach as a mainstay in the competitive Melee meta, but he'd also join the very short list of players who can say they've won a Melee major. Hungrybox, on the other hand, was no stranger to Grand Finals appearances over his tenured career, but he had been in a drought. It had been nearly 3 years since he last won a major tournament, and with a pretty favorable matchup here, he was looking to snap the streak. Years ago, I used my science degree to analyze a Hungrybox set where he popped off so hard he died. That was an online set. The stakes were much, and I mean much higher here. Alright, so as you may know, and like I just kind of mentioned a moment ago, I left my master's degree in engineering behind to pursue this silly little career path on YouTube. I worked as a biomedical engineer in industry for about 7 years, so I find myself uniquely qualified, I guess, to be able to talk about these biological systems at play. Before we can calculate anything, we need to understand how crying actually works. Your tears are produced by the lacrimal glands, which sit just above the outer corner of each eye. They produce a 3-layered fluid, an outer oily layer that prevents evaporation, a middle watery layer with nutrients and oxygen, and an inner mucus layer that helps spread everything around evenly. But not all tears are built the same. There are 3 distinct types. Basal tears are always present, their job is to keep your eyes moist. Your body produces these at around 2 microliters per minute, which tracks to, call it 1 to 5 milliliters per day. Another fun fact, but I actually did find a scientific paper on this from the National Institute of Health which corroborates the per minute basal tear production range, but then it completely botches the conversion to daily production in ounces. And this is exactly why imperial units suck. Anyway, most of what your lacrimal glands produce gets reabsorbed or evaporates, so only a small fraction actually show up as visible tears. Reflex tears are the ones you get from doing stuff like cutting onions or walking into the wind. Your lacrimal glands can ratchet these up to about 300 microliters per minute if you're experiencing irritation, which is about a 100 times increase over basal production. And then there are emotional tears, which are the ones we care about for this calculation. But there's a problem. We know that emotional tear production falls somewhere between basal at 2 microliters per minute and reflex at up to 300 microliters per minute, but I couldn't find a peer-reviewed study that measures the exact lacrimal output during an intense emotional crying episode. So for the sake of the calculation, I'm gonna estimate. And also, I didn't really feel like looking that far into scientific papers, so we're probably fine. I don't know. Science works like that. So let's recap. We have a tear production rate floor of 2 microliters per minute with basal tears, and a tear production rate ceiling of 300 microliters per minute when crymaxing. This is also not super relevant, but maybe worth mentioning, but emotional tears are actually chemically distinct from basal and reflex tears. They contain elevated levels of stress hormones like adrenocorticotropic hormone and leucine and enkephalin, which is a natural painkiller. For the sake of these calculations, I'm gonna umbrella all tear types under an assumption that they're mostly water. But let's get back to the matter at hand. The question we need to answer here is, where exactly does Hungrybox fall on this spectrum? To establish our parameters, we see that Hungrybox begins visibly tearing up here while still actively playing the set. The tears continue through the end of the game and flow well into the post-set celebration. From the first visible tear to when Hungrybox composes himself enough to stand and acknowledge the crowd, I'm gonna call it at around 2.5 minutes of active crying. This is obviously a generous estimate because it's possible there was some internal tear production happening that I'm just not gonna be able to accurately measure by watching a stream replay. Also, I'm just not gonna do that. Like I said before, I couldn't find a peer-reviewed figure for specifically emotional tear output. It also naturally varies from person to person, so we need a range. Our floor is 2, which is just like your eyes doing what they normally do, and our ceiling is 300, which is close to chemical irritation. In Hungrybox's case, he was sobbing on a stage during a game of Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is arguably in the same emotional neighborhood as, say, getting pepper sprayed. So I'm gonna put him at around 100 microliters per minute. But hang on, I don't think that's right either. What we're once again failing to consider here is that Hungrybox has an absolute wagon, so I'm bringing back our favorite coefficient of Giat as a bulk additive to our estimate to account for the added mass and tear production provided by his big ass. I guess this is what he meant by bubble theory. I'm sorry, I'm fucking done, I'm sorry. With all of this in mind, I'm gonna make a minor adjustment to our emotional tear rate estimate and set it to 150 microliters per minute, halfway to the reflex maximum. If we use the equation shown on screen, we can simply multiply our production rate by the duration of time, which brings us to a volume of 375 microliters or 0.375 milliliters. For reference, a single teardrop measures about 6.2 microliters on average, which means Hungrybox produced around 60 individual teardrops during this set. That sounds like a lot until you realize that 0.375 milliliters is about 1/15 of a teaspoon. Let's not give up yet, because something else happened at GX2 that I think is really important to this calculation that we missed. When Hungrybox won the set and collapsed to the floor, a number of people noticed a significant amount of fluid on the ground beneath him. The internet had a lot of fun with this, and I understand the instinct to attribute this to like a spilled water bottle, but as something of a scientist myself, I can confirm without a shadow of a doubt that he pissed himself. And that's close enough to a lacrimal tear production that I'm willing to consider it. However, while I'm hopeful that this will help us better understand the inner machinations of Hungrybox's tear production, this does raise a critical issue with our calculation. 375 microliters is less than half a milliliter, which is obviously less fluid than what was observed on the floor. This means that one of the following must be true. Either A, our production rate estimate of 150 microliters per minute is still too low, and Hungrybox's lacrimal glands operate beyond the documented maximum of human tear production. B, the coefficient of Giat is either incorrect or we need to consider a second coefficient to circle the square. Or C, there are additional sources of fluid output that fall outside of the scope of this analysis. I think probably the easiest way to proceed is by starting with option B, since we already proved the coefficient of Gyat in a previous video. To calculate Hungrybox's cumulative emotional fluid output, we need to audit his entire competitive career. Fortunately, I already made a near 1 hour compilation of him popping off, and there are plenty of resources on the internet that document all of his emotional pop-offs. So by assigning each individual moment to a separate tier, we can construct a scientifically defensible career tier output. The first tier is a standard pop-off, an average win before he started throwing chairs and shit. I think it's pretty safe to assume that Hungrybox is at an elevated heart rate here, but there's minimal lacrimal activity. I'm gonna estimate these at just slightly above basal tier output at around 7.5 microliters per event. As per the quantity of events, Hungrybox has won hundreds of tournaments over a decade of competing, which includes online. Not all of them get a pop-off, but let's say roughly 60% of them do. That puts us at around 240 tier 1 events. Multiply these 240 events by 7.5 microliters and we're left with 1800 microliters or 1.8 milliliters for all of our tier 1 pop-offs. This is the tier that's been keeping chiropractors and furniture manufacturers in business. The chair throws, the Gommel moment, the time he broke his foot. Maybe once or twice a year we find ourselves witnessing peak Hungrybox performance. These carry real emotional weight, so I'm gonna estimate 50 microliters per event from emotional lacrimation alone, not counting sweat, not counting whatever was in that LaCroix he keeps drinking. Let's add around 20 of these events across his career, which adds another 1 milliliter to the total volume. This tier is for the world-shattering moments. Genesis X2, Evo 2016, that time someone threw a crab at his head, the moments where Hungrybox didn't just pop off, he genuinely broke down. Sustained, visible, emotional crying, and we already calculated this at 375 microliters per event at GX2, so I'm just gonna use that as my baseline of comparison here. I'm also gonna be pretty conservative here and only count these 3 events as our canon for this calculation. So that adds another 1.125 milliliters to our volume across these 3 tiers, bringing our running total to 3.925 milliliters. That's still really low though, so I think we need a second coefficient to get our numbers right. So let's bring in the coefficient of piss to account for all of the liquid Hungrybox had fallen into at GX2. This is a raw multiplier that accounts for the fact that Hungrybox operates at a higher emotional baseline than literally any other competitor in Melee history. That puddle on the floor is almost 1.5 times bigger than the measly 4 milliliters he produced from his eyes, so I think a safe coefficient of piss would be 1.4 times. So with this in mind, for our total career emotional tier output, we're left with 5.5 milliliters. But once again, 5.5 milliliters simply is not enough volume to flood a city, so what gives? What I calculated just now is only HBox's emotional tier output. But remember, all of our eyes are also producing basal tiers 24/7. With a basal tier production rate at 1 milliliter per day, and with Hungrybox being 32 years old, so around 11,680 days, that leaves us with a lifetime basal output of 11,680 milliliters or 11.68 liters. Now we're talking, so let's add the reflex tiers back in for every time he's watched Chudat eat an onion or had crashed out on stream for Fox being broken. Conservatively, we'll do 2 milliliters per day across his lifetime, so that same 11,680 days times 2, and we have 23,360 milliliters or 23.36 liters. And our emotional output, a measly 5.5 milliliters, which compared to the other 2 is essentially a rounding error right now, so emotionally devastating but volumetrically pretty irrelevant. This places Hungrybox's grand total for lifetime tier production at approximately 35 liters or 9.3 gallons. Not bad, but not great. San Jose, California covers approximately 466 square kilometers, or 466 million square meters. And FEMA defines significant flooding as water reaching about 15 centimeters or 6 inches in height. In order for San Jose to reach 6 inches of flooding, we would need 69.9 billion liters of fluid. Hungrybox's total lifetime output is only 35 liters, so he's short by a factor of roughly 2 billion. But what if he never stopped? What if Hungrybox cried at his Genesis X2 peak rate continuously without ever stopping? What if the coefficient of piss was the sheer everyday reality of living as a Jigglypuff main? If we consider the GX2 rate of 150 microliters per minute and extrapolate that out over the span of a year, he'd produce around 78.8 liters of fluid per year. So, the answer? HBox would need to cry for 887 million years in order to flood the city of San Jose. We already know that the implementation of a ledge grab limit has shortened the lifespan of puff players by almost half, but how feasible would this actually be? The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, so almost 900 million years is only about 20% of that. If Hungrybox had started crying at his Genesis X2 rate around the time that, say, oxygen first accumulated in the Earth's atmosphere, he'd be done by now. San Jose would be underwater. Plus, on the bright side, the sun won't explode for another 5 billion years, so he's got plenty of time, enough to flood the GX2 venue 5 times over before the solar system ends. I guess all that ledge stalling finally paid off. Look, all jokes aside, the reason the Genesis X2 moment mattered wasn't the volume of tears or how many San Jose's Hungrybox would destroy via chair cannon or tear flooding or bone breaking or popping off so hard he dies. It mattered because of what the moment meant. This was almost 3 long years of trying to prove something to the world. Proving to yourself you can do it, that's important. In 2021, I scientifically proved the only thing that can defeat Hungrybox is Hungrybox. In 2024, I proved IBDW did not, in fact, do enough work against Hungrybox to reverse the pop-off. And in 2026, I can definitively state that in the year 887,000,2026, Juan Hungrybox Debiedma will be flagged as a Category 5 hydrological threat to the city of San Jose, California. Thanks for watching. Woo! Another April Fool's video where I use a degree I spent thousands of dollars on to do some idiotic and ridiculous napkin math. I just want to use a little bit of this outro time to be kind of serious and say thanks to all of you for the pretty insane uptick on the channel recently. I've been publishing pretty much weekly for the last few months, and you guys have been showing up big time and popping off Hungrybox style, so I just want to say I really appreciate it, and I won't be stopping anytime soon. If you'd like to help out even more, and more importantly have the disposable income to do so, you can join my Patreon. All of the names that are on the list right here are folks that are donating at the $5 tier, so check it out if you want to be a part. Thanks again to my top tier patrons here who make videos like these possible, especially Avishua Stein, Bobby Wasabi, Brent Mukai, Carter Roberts, Dark Genix, Eric is Cool, Gustavo Cantu Fernandez, James Fabman, Justin Duncan Mills, Kyle Carlin, Marshall Bradley, and Sam Wright. Alright, that's it. Happy April Fools. Bye!